Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of India's World with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. A delegation of Chinese officials earlier in September inspected World Heritage sites, including the famous Shore Temple, ahead of the summit between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping, slated to be held in October. The Chinese delegation took stock of various aspects, including security and amenities, and looked into the lineup of proposed events during the second edition of the informal summit between Prime Minister Modi and the Chinese President, to be held from October 11th to 13th. Meanwhile, asserting that Beijing and New Delhi need to properly address differences through dialogue, Chinese envoy to India Sun Weidong said that it is necessary to go beyond the mode of differences management and focus on actively shaping the bilateral relations. The Chinese ambassador also asserted that his country will never bully others, nor will it be bullied. On this edition of India's World, we will take stock of Sino-Indian ties and what is the way ahead as far as India and China are concerned. Joining me on the program today are Shakti Sinha, Strategic Affairs expert, Vivek Karju, former ambassador, and Rajendra Harshe, former visiting professor, International Relations, South Asian University. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of India's World. Ambassador, I'd like to begin the program with you. Let's first analyze the status of Sino-Indian ties as it stands today.
I think after the Wuhan summit, there's a greater level of comfort both in Beijing and in Delhi in dealing with each other. Recently, there was an incident at the line of actual control, and there too it was sorted out fairly rapidly, and that was an indication, as some of our officials said, of this new mode of understanding which has come about. So this is a good thing. This informal summit too, one expects, would progress this particular aspect of giving a greater degree of understanding to our leaderships and to the officialdom relating to each other. But having said that, we have to be mindful of the fact that there are major differences between the two countries, that there are some areas where our interests converge, but that there are many areas, economic, security, to mention two, where interests diverge, and diverge, Frank, in very basic ways. So, it is all right to have, to say, as was said in the past, that there is enough space for all of us to grow, that we should not allow our differences to become disputes. I think it's all right. These sentiments are fine sentiments. But at the end of the day, the differences are real, and we have to accept that. And we've got to work on them to try to see that the areas of divergence reduce. But we have to be mindful of the fact that India has to protect and safeguard and promote its interests. And very often, in the process of doing so, we'll clash with the Chinese, and the Chinese, at least as far as I've been able to see, when their co-interests come in, they don't relent. And we've seen that recently in the case of Pakistan. They need not have done what they did in the informal meeting of the UN Security Council. In fact, they need not even have called that UN Security Council meeting. But they did so largely because of the nexus with Pakistan. So these things we cannot overlook.
All right. So, Professor Harshe, is Pakistan going to be the elephant in the room when Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping meet?
I think, basically I agree with what Ambassador stated, but I would just go on adding some more things. Border problems we have talked about, sharing of water we have talked about, but as far as South Asia is concerned, I am concerned about growing Chinese presence. And this is so much more than what we anticipated. For example, their trade of China with all the southern Asian neighbors of India is twice more than that of India. As far as Pakistan is concerned, they have consistently helped it with armaments, with missiles, with sophisticated weapons, and shared their technology. And they have also built ports in Sittwe in Burma, Chittagong in Bangladesh, Hambon Tata in Sri Lanka, and they are also trying to build it in Maldives. So somewhere idea that there is something like string of pearls that people talk about, that is a fear we should have in terms of security. And India, suppose it doesn't become major because it's already an Indo-centric region, and still if it is not able to assert itself in India and in Indian Ocean region, there is something to worry about. That is what I feel. But there are several other issues between India and China which need our attention. As far as trade is concerned, India is permanently in deficit with China. It is in China's favor. Another thing I feel is that China is interested very marginally, while China matters to India very much more because of its association with Pakistan and it being the second largest power after the United States. So these are some of the issues I thought I should flag initially.
All right. Mr. Sinha, the ambassador was talking about how there are several areas of divergence as far as India and China are concerned. The professor elaborated on one of them in the seas. We'll come back to that in just a bit. But how do we bridge the gap really as far as these divergences are concerned? Is there somewhere or somehow that we can meet midway?
If you look at the process for the last few years, I'm going even before Wuhan, the fact that actually these differences have actually grown, not reduced. If you look at the recent Kashmir thing, which Vivek referred to just now, now China claims a part of the erstwhile state of Jammu Kashmir. We will not go into the validity of the claim, it claims it. It is in control of the area that it claims, Aksai Chin. It does not have claim over any other part of the state. And yet, when we made the changes, China's reaction was so violent, I mean, in terms of the language they were using. Now, the rest of Jammu Kashmir, as far as China is concerned, is a dispute between India and Pakistan. The way they took it up, not just in the UN Security Council, the way the verbal language used against India, such strong, that was really a shock to us. We thought that over the period, we should at least manage our differences well. The Wuhan and this is a process of trying to manage your differences, of trying to gradually reduce them. But if you notice on any of these fields, Pakistan you mentioned, the big, what you mentioned a very good expression, the big elephant in the room, you mentioned Pakistan, has the Chinese influence to the detriment of India reduced or increased? It has actually increased over the last few years, financially, strategically, politically. Trade, now by deficit, I'm not worried about deficit figures as such, it is humongous. Leave that aside. The fact that our market access problems has still not been sorted out. So there are many, many things which unfortunately are not reducing. I think Prime Minister Modi has gone out of the way to try and see that these are kept under control. The fact that Quad meetings take place till now, no joint statement was issued, particularly whether it was in Manila, whether it was in Bangkok, so that we are trying to convey to China, listen, we are not ganging up against you. So we are making that extra effort from the Indian side particularly to see that these are kept under check. Unfortunately, to my mind, reciprocity is missing. And that is something to worry about. So as far as we are concerned, we have tried our best always not to sound that we are aggravating the situation, never to do that. But it requires both of us, both sides to be having that attitude.
Okay, all right. Since Mr. Sinha brought up Quad, I have to take that up with you, Ambassador, and let's focus a little bit on the maritime domain now. We have the Malabar exercises, we have the Quad. Are players in the region skeptical about China's ambitions in the region and hence are going to use these platforms to try and keep China at bay?
Of course, the rise of China, the aggressiveness that they have shown while rising, a process which is going on, the disdain they have for international norms, all this has deeply worried countries in the Indo-Pacific region. I think they also want a balance. And the balance that they look for is not only from the United States, but from the region itself. It's a very welcome development that the term Indo-Pacific is now being used. I think these terms are important because in the mind, what will now be embedded is that India is a part of this region. Why do I mention this? If you see the terminology which was used in the past, it was Asia Pacific. And that stopped somewhere around Myanmar. And India was not even in this imagination of what is the Asia Pacific. Today, on the other hand, we are there. It is for us to play this game. Quite frankly, I feel that we shouldn't be diffident. It doesn't, we are much too big to be subservient to anyone, and everyone knows it. It's not part of our tradition. But we should not have any difficulty in upgrading our participation in the Quad, in not making it anti-Chinese, but conveying to the Chinese that if we need to participate along with others who may be concerned about the way you are behaving, so be it.
Does that also include maybe forays into the South China Sea?
I think if the Chinese are venturing as they are in the Indian Ocean in a big way, then we need to develop our naval capacities to be able to go wherever our interests demand, and that includes the South China Sea. We should not be diffident in indicating our interests, our stakes. It doesn't mean that we have to be abrasive, but in a confident way, moving ahead is perfectly in order.
Okay, that having been said, Professor, what is it that we would like to achieve, would like to convey to China during the second informal meet between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping?
I think some issues which have been pending for long now, there would be some more dialogue. 93 we carried, 96 we carried. So continuously, if we can indulge in dialogue, we can convey many things. For instance, Chinese are very apprehensive about Dalai Lama, his stay in Dharamshala, Tibet at large, and they also consider at one level Arunachal Pradesh as South Tibet. Somewhere India has to be aggressive in its diplomacy to tell them what are our kind of notions of boundaries. Forget McMahon, it can be kind of again rethought whatever we want to, but that somewhere India's integrity and sovereignty is crucial as far as negotiations are concerned, and whether it's Aksai Chin or part of the portion which China has occupied in Pakistani occupied Kashmir, India should be concerned about it. It should be concerned about Northeast, because tomorrow India's trade with all these Southeast Asian countries is possible if Northeast is firmly in our hands. And somewhere India has shown some kind of guts. I like to argue with Ambassador that yes, we should be indicating, but after Wuhan and a little later when Doklam crisis took place, India was standing firm somewhere, and somewhere Chinese had to be had to consider India's viewpoint. There is a typical strategy that they adopt of building roads, coming nearer and all this, but somewhere Indian government took firm stand as far as Doklam is concerned, I feel. And still what happens is most number of times there is asymmetry of relationship between the two, and China is much larger power that India has to keep in mind when it is also indicating its interest in Pacific region, particularly Spratly Islands and wherever China is expansive. But Indian Ocean is concerned, India can be assertive, and this can be also kind of stated in open meetings between the two Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping. So it's possible. Yeah. And one more point I thought I should underline is somewhere China is also interested in Afghanistan. Earlier I thought they were interested in only kind of strategic materials and minerals in Afghanistan, but today they are also interested in internal matters, in sorting them out. So that also needs to be taken care of, because India has interest in Afghanistan, it has invested so much, and also entire Central Asia. So China can be also met somewhere in forums like Shanghai Cooperation Organization to again have a dialogue, but this informal dialogue can set the trend. Basically what Ambassador and also Shakti ji are saying, that there is convergence and divergence, but when you come down to concrete talk level, divergence is more apparent and convergence is not.
Sure, yes, Ambassador.
No, I think we handled Doklam very well. I think and that sent a very good signal to the Chinese that the Indians can't be taken for granted, that they are holding a line and they are not moving. In fact, they behaved in a very un-Chinese like way. I mean, their media didn't know how to handle it. They started.
Absolutely.
If you see the kind of stuff that came out during
From
Doklam from China,
Global Times and all. Absolutely.
Global Times, etc., was completely amazing. So that was the appropriate signal. And that we weren't strident. We were very confident in holding a firm line. And that is the kind of thing we've got to show in other areas too.
Right. So, rub shoulders with the Chinese, especially in our own backyard, is what the panelists are suggesting. And since we are here, Mr. Sinha, what is it that we would like to take up with the Chinese? What areas do we need to focus on?
One, of course, is the peak question. It's very important because you are giving Pakistan the confidence to try and maintain its earlier policy of bleeding India. Now, Kashmir has completely upset their calculations, and you must credit the government for that. But these people are not lying low. If you see the way the language has been used by Pakistan for the last, Pakistan has 100 million problems, but all they are talking about is Kashmir, Kashmir, Kashmir. The butcher of Kashmir. They are calling us all kinds of names. Qureshi said, I have not seen into the room with the butcher of Kashmir, referring to Foreign Minister Jaishankar. So, this is something which is completely unacceptable. Second is mentioned, in our backyard it is there, fine. Each country is sovereign. Bangladesh is sovereign, Sri Lanka is sovereign, Maldives is sovereign, which is how we deal with them. But if you create a situation in those countries which leads to financial bankruptcy, and then India would have to somehow work with those countries, that is not a model that's going to work for very long. Maldives, already that backlash was there, but the kind of financing these countries require, obviously India can't write the checks out. But we have multilateral institutions where China is there, India is there. So you can use a more responsible method of supporting development in our neighborhood, which is sustainable, financially sustainable, and is politically acceptable. If you create assets in those countries which can be used by the Chinese Navy as an example, that is not something that. So these are the kinds of 2-3 very important issues. But yes, Pakistan has to be right at the top of the agenda, not to the world. We can handle Pakistan on our own, but to the Chinese, yes, because it is because of you that the Pakistanis are being able to do all this. And the Indian Ocean. We have to be very, very careful, mindful of the fact that yes, Indian Ocean is not India's ocean, but neither is South China Sea China's little sea. That is also international waters. So, you'd expect a bit of reciprocity, a bit of this. These are the things which we really must take up with China.
Right. Ambassador? Yeah, yes, Professor.
One point only that this is one, I think I quite agree with Shakti. As far as terror is concerned, India has to be firm and also give message firmly to China because they are backing it up. Yeah. Another thing that I thought was unnecessary sometimes our membership of nuclear supplier group is being blocked by China, and that is where effort is required. Why constantly they dilly-dally start telling that non-nuclear NPT countries will think about it more thoroughly, but we are not becoming members of nuclear supplier groups, so that requires attention. And also attention needs to be given to kind of their base in Djibouti and their constant forays into all these Indian Ocean region, just the way they are doing things in South Pacific, they are also in Indian Ocean. That's why what Ambassador was saying, that's where we can also venture out in South Pacific Ocean. It is also part of India's interest, and uninhibitedly, but absolutely firmly, and not being anti-Chinese, but protecting India's interest and to the hilt.
Okay. I think we are in agreement here, all panelists suggesting that we need to be more assertive going forward. But, Ambassador, I'd like to raise the issue of Pakistan with you. Pakistan, or rather China, is Pakistan's all-weather friend. But looking at the way how Pakistan has reacted in the recent past, looking at Pakistan's economy and the kind of statements that they made at international forum, do you believe that Pakistan at some point in time could be a liability for China? And this is something that the Chinese realize as well.
I see it differently. Till CPEC, which is part of BRI, I had seen Sino-Pak relations as founded on a shared negativity towards India. With CPEC, a positive pillar has been added to that relationship. Even if you take India out of the equation, there is now need for China of Pakistan because of Gwadar, which is a very important development, negative for us, clearly, a challenge to us, but it's there. And even though CPEC, they say the corridor itself is not economically viable, the money they are sinking into Pakistan will not yield results.
There's local resistance as well.
The local resistance, but I see this as a very important signal to Pakistan, to the region and to us that look, our relationship now stands on a firm foundation and this is a tie which we will not give up. Fine. It's for nations, sovereign states to decide their relationships. But we should tell them that if they are equating Pakistan with us in, for instance, the NSG, the Nuclear Suppliers Group, we should tell them firmly it's not a friendly act. And here I think our media and our strategic community has to come forth even more than the government to signal to the Chinese that any equation of India or Pakistan in any area, especially when it comes to the NSG, cannot be construed as a friendly act, even if everyone knows the nature of nuclear cooperation between China and Pakistan. Notwithstanding that, I am saying that we should signal to them quite clearly that the time has come when if you persist with this, then we'll draw our conclusions and more importantly, we'll act accordingly. Because let us face it, the Masood Azhar delisting, or listing, sorry, the Masood Azhar listing was not on account of us, it was on account of what the Americans had threatened them with, that they will expose them in the UN Security Council.
Exactly.
So, here I think we need to talk very plainly with the Chinese.
Are the Chinese willing to listen though, Shakti Sinha?
At this moment, apparently not, but China is vulnerable to American trade sanctions now. Whatever they may say, their economy is suffering for trade dispute with America. The fact that till a year ago we were not prepared for a Quad meeting above the level of Joint Secretary, we have jumped 3 levels to a Foreign Minister level meeting. So now these are signs of changing times. The fact that, and I tell everybody in fact that who is the real founder of Quad 2, 2017? It is Xi Jinping. It was the Chinese relentless pressure on all of us that forced us to talk to each other in this strategic manner, which we were avoiding. We kept saying Quad is not to be equated with Indo-Pacific. We talk about the weather, we talk about humanitarian assistance, etc. Now we are coming forth, no, we are talking about maritime security. We are talking about freedom of navigation in the seas. So I think China will not directly, China never directly backs out of anything, but they start gradually shifting their stance. And I think, as both of my panelists have said so correctly, I mean, if we are really firm and we show that we are firm, it's in China's larger long-term interest. At the end of the day, we buy stuff worth $70 billion for them. Today it's 70, not very big for the Chinese. Tomorrow it will be $150 billion. You want your Chinese companies to be more active in India, Huawei, etc. You would need, China would need then to talk to India and then take note of our concerns. I would not like Huawei to be in India at all, but that's just me. But China would like it to be there. So you do have, countries which are on a trade surplus cannot negotiate. Countries which are on a trade deficit can negotiate.
Can negotiate. Okay. Yes, Ambassador?
No, I think on the technology front, it's we have some levers and we must not be shy of applying leverage.
Okay. All right. And yes.
One Belt Road initiative also, where our interests are concerned, particularly Gilgit, Pakistan, and from there the road is going. The way we are standing firm on that, we should continue to stand firmly.
Okay.
And
all
also
right.
retain that position. Why?
Okay. Closing comments now from all my guests, starting first with you, Shakti Sinha, on the best way forward and how do we prepare for the 11th to the 13th of October?
One good thing in the India-China relations have been, and the way we've handled it, that we have always been very calm about it. Vivek just mentioned the height of Doklam crisis. The Indian government was absolutely calm throughout. Publicly, privately, of course, there must have been lots of discussions and agitation, etc. But we maintained a public posture of calmness, of maturity, and that was really upsetting the Chinese. Because Chinese wanted us to react far more violently. Earlier, we didn't do that. We were very, very careful. The language that China really listens to is basically the language of either power, military power, or economic power. We are not in the military field at all. None of us would want to go there at all. But economically, the stronger India emerges as an economy, the faster it grows as an economy, that much more leverage you have over China.
Right.
So in that case, you have to maintain your ground with them on all these issues. On none of these issues, I can see India getting out because we are not the aggressor. We are the aggrieved party. But unfortunately for China, China sees anybody not agreeing with them as aggravating the situation.
Right.
So it's not easy to manage with them, but you have to stay firm.
Right. Ambassador?
I think we've got to convey to the Chinese, and the Prime Minister obviously has a good equation with Xi Jinping, and there's a level of comfort now between the governments, that they should look to the future. I think they've been mired in the past. They should look to the future, where India is going, what is the trajectory, how the region is evolving, and what role India will play in the standing India will have. And that if they try at this stage to either deliberately or even inadvertently circumscribe us, then the areas of convergence that we want to expand will not take place. And that may not be in our interest, but it will certainly not be in their interest too.
Right. Professor, close the show for us with the concluding
Hard kind of
remarks.
issues like security and economy, my panelists have stated very well. I think we should also relate to them at the level of culture and education, where Buddhism and also Hinduism is mother server. So many such kind of commonalities are there which bind two long traditional civilizations, and they can be also a bond. And people to people contact, in how many ways we can initiate them, that would also give another clue where we know how to communicate to each other. Because this communication level is always at the official level, sometimes with the companies and business and leverage in business. But people must get also chance to be knowing each other, and things will even improve much better.
Okay, all right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of India as well. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. We'd like to hear from you as well. Do share your feedback with us. Our email ID is indiaaswell.feedback@gmail.com. You can also tweet to us using our Twitter handles at FRP09 and at Rajya Sabha TV. That's it from me. See you again next time.